The wedding dress was ruined. Elena stood at the makeshift altar in the pack's ceremonial clearing, white silk torn at the hem, dirt staining the train she'd spent weeks embroidering by hand. But the dress didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered except the look of disgust on Garrett's face as he stood 3 feet away, refusing to meet her eyes. "I can't do this." His voice carried across the silent gathering. 200 pack members watched, their faces a mix of pity and satisfaction. "I won't bind myself to damaged goods." Elena's breath caught. The words hit like physical blows, each one landing in the hollow space where her heart used to be. Damaged goods. As if the scars on her soul were visible, written across her skin for everyone to see. "Garrett, please." She hated the tremor in her voice, hated that she was begging. "We talked about this. You said..." "I said a lot of things." He finally looked at her, and the coldness in his blue eyes made her take a step back. "Before I knew what you were, before I understood what binding myself to an Omega like you would cost me." The pack elder stepped forward, his weathered face impassive. "Alpha Garrett, the ceremony has begun. To reject your mate now..." "I reject her." Garrett's voice rang out clear and final. "I, Garrett Thorne, reject Elena Ashwood as my mate and future Luna of the Crescent Moon Pack. I sever all bonds between us." The pain slammed into her like a freight train. Elena gasped, doubling over as the half-formed mate bond shattered. It felt like something vital was being ripped from her chest, leaving a bleeding wound behind. Through the agony, she heard murmurs from the crowd, whispers that sounded almost approving. "You're free to go." Garrett turned his back on her, already walking toward his beta. "And take that dress with you. I paid for it." Elena stood frozen, the torn hem of her dress clutched in shaking hands. This couldn't be happening. They were supposed to be bonded by now. She was supposed to be Luna. Instead, she was standing in front of her entire pack, publicly humiliated and cast aside like trash. "Move along, girl." The elder's voice held no sympathy. "You're no longer welcome on pack lands. You have until sunset to collect your things." 3 hours later, Elena stumbled through the forest with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small bag of belongings. The pack enforcers had made sure she left quickly, escorting her to the border and shoving her across it without ceremony. She'd tried to go to her childhood home first, but her father had already locked the door. She could still hear his words through the wood. "You've brought enough shame to this family. Don't come back." The wedding dress was gone, stripped off and left in a heap at the pack border. Now she wore an old sweater and jeans, but she was still freezing. The autumn night was cold, and she had no destination, no plan. She just walked, putting distance between herself and the only home she'd ever known. Her feet carried her deeper into unclaimed territory, away from pack lands and human settlements. The forest grew denser, the trees older. She should have been afraid. Rogues hunted in these woods. Worse things too, according to the stories. But fear required the ability to care about consequences, and Elena had nothing left to protect. When her legs finally gave out, she collapsed against an ancient oak tree, sliding down its rough bark until she sat in the dirt. The torn wedding veil was still tangled in her dark hair. She pulled it free, the delicate lace snagging on her fingers, and let it drift to the ground. "Damaged goods," she whispered to no one. "That's all I've ever been." She didn't know how long she sat there. Long enough for the moon to rise, full and bright, casting silver shadows through the canopy. Long enough for the cold to seep into her bones. Long enough that she stopped shivering and started feeling warm. which she knew wasn't a good sign. Maybe this was better. Maybe it was easier to just let go, to stop fighting, to stop hoping that someday someone would look at her and see something worth keeping. The snap of a branch made her head jerk up. Through the trees, a figure approached. Tall, impossibly tall, moving with a fluid grace that no wolf possessed. As he stepped into the moonlight, Elena's breath stopped. He was the most beautiful and terrifying thing she'd ever seen. Pale skin that seemed to glow in the darkness, sharp, aristocratic features that looked carved from marble, dark hair that fell just past his collar, and eyes, ancient, dark eyes that fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to run and stay frozen all at once. A vampire. She was staring at a vampire. Every instinct screamed at her to shift, to run. But she couldn't move. He moved closer, each step deliberate and measured, until he stood directly in front of her. Up close, she could see he wore all black, expensive clothing from another era, perfectly tailored. He looked like he'd stepped out of a painting in a museum. "You're dying." His voice was smooth, quiet, with an accent she couldn't place. Not a question, a statement. "Good," Elena heard herself say. The word came out bitter and small. Something flickered across his perfect features. Not quite emotion, more like recognition. He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level, and studied her face with unnerving focus. "You were cast out." His gaze traveled to the torn wedding veil on the ground beside her. "On what should have been your bonding day." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. Speech seemed too difficult. Everything seemed too difficult. "I know that pain." He said it so quietly she almost didn't hear. Then, before she could process the words, he was moving. One arm slid behind her shoulders, the other beneath her knees, and he lifted her as if she weighed nothing. "You're not dying tonight." "Why?" The question slipped out as her head lolled against his chest. He was cold, vampire cold, but somehow it felt right against her feverish skin. "Why do you care?" "Because I found you." He started walking, moving through the forest faster than should have been possible while carrying someone. "And what I find, I keep." She should have been terrified. She should have fought, screamed, done something. But exhaustion and heartbreak and hypothermia had taken their toll. As her vision started to blur, Elena caught one last glimpse of his face. Those ancient dark eyes, looking down at her with something that might have been gentleness. Then everything went black. When Elena woke, she thought she'd died and somehow ended up in someone else's afterlife. The bed beneath her was impossibly soft, covered in silk sheets that must have cost more than her father's house. Heavy velvet curtains blocked out the light, but candles flickered on ornate tables, casting warm shadows across stone walls. The room was enormous, bigger than the entire ground floor of her childhood home. She sat up slowly, her body aching but no longer freezing. Someone had changed her clothes. She now wore a nightgown of fine white linen, simple but clearly expensive. Her hair had been brushed and braided. The thought of strange hands on her while she was unconscious should have terrified her. But the braid was so careful, so gentle that she couldn't muster the fear. A soft knock on the door made her freeze. "Come in," she said, then immediately wondered why she'd given permission. This wasn't her room. She had no authority here. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged woman in servant's clothing, carrying a tray. She had kind eyes and moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd been in service for years. "Good evening, my lady." The woman set the tray on the bedside table. Bread, cheese, fruit, and soup that smelled divine. I'm Mrs. Harding. His lordship asked me to attend you. How are you feeling? I'm not. Elena stopped. How was she feeling? Confused, terrified, lost. Where am I? Shadowmere Castle, my lady. The Lord's estate. The Lord. The vampire who'd found her in the forest. Elena's mind raced, trying to make sense of this. Why did he bring me here? Mrs. Harding's expression softened. That's a question for his lordship, I'm afraid. But you're safe here, I can promise you that. Now, you should eat. You've been asleep for 2 days. 2 days. Elena stared at the food, her stomach growling despite her confusion. I don't understand. What does he want from me? To see you well fed and rested for a start. Mrs. Harding moved toward the door. I'll let him know you're awake. He's been checking on you every few hours. Before Elena could protest, the woman was gone. She was alone with a tray of food and 1,000 questions. Every instinct told her this was a trap. Vampires didn't save dying werewolves out of kindness. They were predators, monsters from the stories her mother used to tell. He must want something. Blood, probably, or worse. But the food smelled so good, and she was so hungry. Elena picked up the spoon with shaking hands and tasted the soup. It was perfect, rich and warming, with herbs she couldn't name. She told herself she'd eat just enough to regain her strength. Then she'd find a way out of here. One bowl wouldn't hurt. One bowl turned into the entire tray. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a real meal. Pack Omegas ate last and least. And the last few weeks she'd been too nervous about the wedding to keep much down. Now her body demanded fuel, and she gave it everything on the tray. She was setting down her napkin when another knock came. This time, she recognized the presence on the other side of the door before he spoke. It pressed against her senses like weight, like power, barely contained. May I come in? His voice was muffled by the heavy wood, but she could still hear the care in it, as if her permission actually mattered. Yes. He entered, and Elena's breath caught. Somehow he looked even more imposing in the candlelight than he had in the forest. He wore different clothes, still all black, still elegantly tailored, but his presence filled the room. Those ancient dark eyes found hers immediately, assessing. You ate. Something that might have been satisfaction crossed his features. Good. Thank you for the food. The words came out automatically, packed manners ingrained too deep to shake. And for not letting me die, I suppose. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. He moved to the chair across from her bed but didn't sit. Instead, he stood behind it, hands resting on the carved wood back, keeping distance between them. I'm Kale. This is my home. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. Elena stared at him. I don't understand. You're a vampire. I'm a werewolf. We're supposed to be enemies. Are we? One dark brow arched. You don't seem very dangerous to me. I'm not. The admission tasted like ash. I'm just an Omega. Damaged goods, according to my pack. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. The alpha who rejected you is a fool. The blunt statement caught her off guard. Elena looked down at her hands, at the simple nightgown, anywhere but at him. He had his reasons. I'm not fit to be Luna. I'm too weak to. Stop. The command was quiet but absolute. Kyle moved around the chair and she tensed. But he only knelt on one knee so they were at eye level. Still keeping distance, still not touching. I don't care what lies they told you. You survived being cast out in winter with no supplies and no destination. You survived blood loss and hypothermia. Weak things don't survive that. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. What do you want from me? There has to be something. Vampires don't just save wolves. No, he agreed. We don't. But I'm not just any vampire, and you're not just any wolf. He studied her face, those ancient eyes seeing too much. When I found you, you'd given up. I know that look. I've worn it myself a very long time ago, and I decided that if you were strong enough to survive, you deserved more than dying alone in the dirt. So what happens now? Now you heal, you rest, you eat, and when you're ready, you decide what you want to do next. He stood, moving back toward the door. This castle has a library, gardens, music rooms. You're free to explore any of it. The servants have been instructed to help you with anything you need. And if I want to leave? He paused, hand on the door. Then you leave. I'm not your captor, Elena. The door isn't locked. She must have looked skeptical because he actually smiled. A small, sad thing that made him look less ancient and more lonely. Test it if you don't believe me. But I hope you'll stay, at least for a while. I think you could use the rest. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. And Elena was left alone with more questions than answers. She stared at the door for a long moment, then got up and crossed the room on shaky legs. Her hand closed around the handle. It turned easily. The door swung open to reveal an empty hallway lit by wall sconces. No guards, no locks. He'd told the truth. She really could leave. Elena stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking out at freedom and escape. Then slowly, she closed the door and went back to bed. Not because she had to, because for the first time in as long as she could remember, she wanted to see what came next. Over the next 3 days, Elena explored the castle like a ghost. She'd creep through hallways in the early evening, when the sun had just set and most of the servants were busy with dinner preparations. Shadowmere was enormous, far larger than she'd imagined. Gothic architecture mixed with comforts from different eras, rooms upon rooms of collected history. She found the library on the second night. It was 3 stories tall, with spiral staircases connecting the levels and thousands of books lining the walls. She'd never seen so many books in one place. Pack Omegas weren't encouraged to read beyond basic literacy, but her mother had taught her in secret before she died. Now, Elena ran her fingers along ancient spines, breathing in the scent of old paper and leather. You're welcome to borrow anything you'd like. She spun around, heart hammering, to find Kale standing in the doorway. He looked almost apologetic for startling her. I didn't hear you. Old habit. He moved into the room but stayed near the entrance, giving her space. I forget to make noise sometimes. Elena turned back to the books, using them as an excuse not to meet his eyes. This collection must have taken centuries to build. 800 years, give or take. She could hear the smile in his voice. I've always been fond of stories. They're windows into how people think, what they value, how they change. 800 years, she repeated, the number almost incomprehensible. You've been alive for 800 years. Alive is a generous term, but yes. The silence stretched. Not quite comfortable, but not hostile either. Elena pulled a book from the shelf, poetry, by the look of it, and flipped through yellowed pages. Why poetry? She asked before she could stop herself. If you've been collecting for 800 years, why so much poetry? Kyle moved closer, just a step, and she tensed. He noticed and stopped. Because poetry distills truth into its purest form. No room for lies when every word has to carry weight. He nodded at the book in her hands. That one's from the 14th century. A vampire who fell in love with a human woman. It didn't end well. Do they ever? End well, I mean? Sometimes. His voice was quiet. When both people are brave enough to try. Elena set the book back on the shelf carefully. Mrs. Harding said you've been checking on me while I was unconscious. I wanted to make sure you were healing properly. Why? She finally turned to face him fully. You keep saying you found me, so you're keeping me. But I don't understand what that means. I'm not a possession. I'm not. Her voice cracked. I'm not worth keeping. Kyle's expression shifted, something like pain crossing his perfect features. Who told you that? Everyone. The admission burst out of her. My father, my pack, the alpha who was supposed to be my mate. Everyone I've ever known has made it clear that I'm a burden. An omega with no notable skills, no power, no value. So why would you, an ancient vampire lord, want me here? Because, he said simply, everyone was wrong. The words hung in the air between them. Elena wanted to believe them, wanted so badly to believe that someone could look at her and see something other than a failed omega. But hope was dangerous. Hope hurt when it was ripped away. I should go. She moved toward the door, needing distance, needing to think. Thank you for the library. He stepped aside to let her pass, but as she reached the doorway, his hand caught her wrist. Not hard, just firm enough to make her pause. When she looked down, she saw what she'd missed before. Faint scars circling her wrists, almost hidden beneath the sleeve of her dress. You flinched, he said quietly. Every time I move too quickly, every time I get close, someone hurt you. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer. Couldn't answer without breaking apart completely. Kyle's thumb brushed over one of the scars, so gentle she barely felt it. Then he released her. I won't ever hurt you, Elena. Not like that. Not in any way I can help. She fled. 2 days later, Elena still couldn't shake those words. She wandered the castle at odd hours, exploring rooms she had no right to be in, waiting for someone to tell her to leave. No one did. The servants treated her with quiet respect. Mrs. Harding brought meals to her room without comment. And Cale kept his distance. But she'd catch glimpses of him. Reading in the library after she'd left, walking the halls late at night. Once, she'd looked out her window at 3 a.m. and seen him standing in the gardens below. So still he could have been a statue. The gardens. She hadn't explored those yet. The night air was crisp when she stepped outside, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. The castle's rear entrance led to a sprawling garden, unlike anything she'd seen in packed territory. Night-blooming flowers glowed pale in the moonlight. Jasmine, moonflowers, night phlox. Gravel paths wound between sculpted hedges and ancient trees. It was beautiful and strange and utterly peaceful. I hoped you'd find this place. Elena turned to find Cale standing on the path behind her. He must have followed her outside, but this time she didn't flinch. Maybe she was getting used to his presence, or maybe she was just tired of running. It's beautiful, she said, turning back to the flowers. I've never seen a garden like this. Most people haven't. These plants only bloom under moonlight. I've collected them from all over the world over the last few centuries. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him, but not touching. I find them more honest than day-blooming flowers. They show their true nature only when most of the world is asleep. Elena reached out to touch a moonflower, its white petals soft as silk. I used to have a small garden. Just herbs and vegetables, nothing fancy. But She stopped. The pack didn't think omegas should have hobbies. Waste of time when there was work to be done. What happened to it? Your garden? My father plowed it under after my mother died. Said it was taking up space. She felt Kale's anger before she saw it. A cold fury that made the temperature around them drop several degrees. When she glanced at him, his jaw was tight, his eyes hard. Your pack, he said carefully. Sounds like it was run by small-minded fools who mistook cruelty for strength. They weren't. She stopped. Were they cruel? Or had she just been so used to it that she'd stopped noticing? It was just how things were. Alphas on top, betas in the middle, omegas at the bottom. That's pack structure. That's an excuse for abuse. Kale's voice was quiet but firm. Real strength protects those who can't protect themselves. Real power is measured by how you treat those beneath you, not by how thoroughly you can crush them. Elena stared at him. This ancient vampire who spoke about pack dynamics with more wisdom than her alpha ever had. How would you know? About pack structure, I mean. You're not a wolf. No, but I've lived a very long time. Long enough to see countless groups rise and fall. The ones that survive are the ones that value all their members, not just the strongest. He turned to look at her directly. You deserved better than what they gave you. You know that, don't you? Did she? Elena had spent so long being told she was worthless that the words had carved themselves into her bones. But standing here, in this beautiful garden, with this impossibly old vampire, who seemed to actually care whether she lived or died, something inside her chest shifted. I'm starting to, she whispered. Kale's expression softened. For a moment, they stood in silence, surrounded by flowers that only showed their beauty in darkness. Then he gestured to a stone bench beneath a flowering tree. Will you sit with me? I promise I don't bite. A pause, without permission anyway. The joke was so unexpected that Elena laughed. Actually laughed, the sound rusty from disuse. She sat and he joined her, careful to leave space between them. Why did you really save me? She asked. And don't say because you found me. There has to be more to it than that. Kyle was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the garden. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. 300 years ago, I was betrayed by someone I trusted. Someone I loved. She used me for power. And when she'd taken what she wanted, she tried to destroy me. I survived, but barely. And for a very long time after, I was exactly where you were in that forest. Alive, but not living. Breathing, but not caring whether I continued to do so. Elena's breath caught. What changed? Time. Patience. Small kindnesses from unexpected sources. He looked at her then, those ancient eyes holding something raw and real. When I found you, I saw myself. Someone convinced she was worthless, ready to give up. And I thought, if I could help one person avoid the centuries of loneliness it took me to heal, wouldn't that be worth something? So, I'm a project? The words came out sharper than she intended. Something to make you feel better about your past? No. The firmness in his voice made her pause. You're a person who deserves a chance to discover who she is without people telling her she's worthless. That's all. No obligations, no expectations. Just a chance. Elena looked down at her hands, at the scars on her wrists. I don't know who I am. I've been an Omega for so long, I don't know how to be anything else. Then maybe it's time to find out. Kyle stood, offering her his hand. I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise that while you're here, you'll be safe. You'll be fed, and you'll be treated with the dignity you should have had all along. She stared at his outstretched hand. This was a choice. She could refuse it, could leave tonight, could try to find her way back to Pac lands, beg for readmittance. Or she could take his hand and see what came next. Elena took his hand. His skin was cold against hers, but his grip was steady and sure. When he helped her to her feet, he didn't let go immediately. Instead, he looked down at their joined hands with something like wonder. You're not afraid of me right now, he said quietly. No, Elena realized. I'm not. Good. He released her hand slowly. Fear is exhausting. I'd rather you save your energy for better things. As they walked back to the castle together, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in months. Maybe years. It took her several minutes to identify the feeling, but when she did, it made her smile. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, terrifying hope. Maybe she could stay a little longer. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange but pleasant rhythm. Elena would wake in the afternoon, eat the meals Mrs. Harding brought her, then spend her evenings exploring the castle. She started reading the books in Kyle's library, devouring everything from history to poetry to philosophy. When she'd mention something she'd read, Kyle would often appear, seemingly by coincidence, and they'd end up discussing it for hours. He never pushed, never demanded her time or attention. But he was there, a steady presence in the background of her new life. Sometimes she'd find him in the library at midnight, reading in a chair by the fire. Other times she'd walk the gardens and discover him tending the night-blooming flowers. They'd talk or sit in comfortable silence, and slowly, the constant tension in her shoulders began to ease. The servants treated her like a guest, but more than that, they treated her like she mattered. Mrs. Harding asked about her preferences for meals. The groundskeeper showed her which flowers would bloom each night. Even Castle's steward, a severe-looking man named Mr. Graves, offered her a small nod of acknowledgement when they passed in the halls. It was almost enough to make her forget about the world beyond the castle walls. Almost. But on the 15th night, reality came crashing back. Elena was in the library, curled up in her favorite chair with a book of folklore, when raised voices echoed from somewhere deeper in the castle. She set down the book, her wolf instincts prickling with warning. Those weren't servant voices. They were rougher, angrier, familiar in a way that made her stomach drop. Pack wolves. She was moving before she could think, following the sound to the main hall. What she found made her blood turn to ice. Garrett stood in the center of Kale's throne room, flanked by 6 pack warriors. Her ex-alpha looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, blonde, classically handsome in that wholesome way that had once made her heart flutter. Now it just made her feel sick. Kyle sat on his throne, utterly relaxed, one leg crossed over the other. But Elena could see the tension in his shoulders, the dangerous glint in his dark eyes. Around the room, his court had gathered, vampires in elegant clothing, watching the wolves with expressions ranging from boredom to thinly veiled hostility. I've been patient, vampire, Garrett's voice carried across the hall. But my patience has limits. Return what belongs to my pack, and we'll leave in peace. Nothing in this castle belongs to you, Wolf. Kale's voice was ice. Perhaps you'd like to be more specific about what you think I've stolen. The Omega, Elena Ashwood. She was cast out from our lands, but Pack law still claims her. She's mine too. I'm no one's. The words burst out of Elena before she could stop them. Every head in the room turned to stare at her, but she only had eyes for Garrett. She stepped into the throne room, her heart hammering, her hands shaking. I'm not yours, Garrett. You rejected me. You threw me out of the pack. You don't get to claim me now. Garrett's expression shifted from surprise to something calculating. Elena, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. He moved toward her, and she automatically took a step back. The pack made a mistake. I made a mistake. We want you to come home. Liar. The word came out flat. You don't want me. You want something. What happened? Did your new alliance fall through? His jaw tightened, and she knew she'd hit the mark. Of course. The pack he'd hoped to ally with must have rejected him, just like he'd rejected her. And now he needed her back to save face, to pretend he hadn't thrown away his mate in a fit of cruel pride. What I want doesn't matter, Garrett said, his voice taking on that alpha command tone that used to make her submit automatically. Your pack, Elena. You belong with us. Now come here. Elena's wolf stirred, responding to the command despite her human mind's refusal. Her body took a half step forward before she caught herself, gritting her teeth against the compulsion. Then Kale was there, somehow moving from his throne to between her and Garrett in the space of a heartbeat. He didn't touch her, didn't even look at her, but his presence was a wall between them. She said no. Kyle's voice could have frozen blood. I suggest you listen. Garrett's eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising to the challenge. This is pack business, vampire. It doesn't concern you. She's in my home, under my protection. That makes it very much my concern. Kale's power filled the room, cold and ancient and absolute. And I don't take kindly to people giving orders to my guests. Guest? Is that what you're calling her? Garrett's laugh was ugly. We all know what vampires keep werewolves for. How long until you drain her dry? How long until she's nothing but a blood bag? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Several of Kyle's court hissed, fangs extending. But Kale remained perfectly still, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You have 10 seconds to leave my castle before I demonstrate exactly what an ancient vampire does to those who insult his hospitality. I promise you won't enjoy the lesson. Elena. Garrett ignored Kale entirely, his eyes burning into hers. You have a choice. Come home with your pack where you belong, or stay here with this monster and become his whore. Choose. The word hit her like a slap. All those old fears, all those old voices that said she was worthless, that she was damaged, that she deserved whatever scraps she was given. They all came rushing back. Her throat closed, her vision blurred. And then Kyle spoke, so quietly that only she could hear. You don't have to choose anything you don't want, Elena. Not ever again. Something in his voice broke through the panic. Elena looked up at him, at this ancient vampire who'd given her kindness when she expected cruelty, who'd given her space when she expected demands, who'd given her a choice when everyone else had tried to decide her fate for her. The fear melted away. The doubt quieted, and in its place, something else rose. Something that felt like strength. I choose to stay. Her voice was shaky at first, but it grew stronger with each word. I choose to stay here, with Kale. Not because I have to, because I want to, because for the first time in my life, someone is treating me like I matter. Garrett's face twisted with rage. You're making a mistake. No. Elena stepped around Cale, standing on her own now. The mistake was believing people like you when they said I was worthless. The mistake was thinking I deserved to be treated like trash. But I'm done making that mistake. You'll regret this. Garrett's hand moved to his belt, and Elena saw the flash of silver. A dagger. He'd brought a silver dagger to a vampire's castle. If you won't come willingly. He didn't get to finish. Kyle moved faster than Elena's eyes could follow, and suddenly Garrett was on his knees. The dagger clattered to the stone floor, and Kyle's hand was wrapped around the Alpha's throat. I gave you a chance to leave, Kyle said, his voice devoid of emotion. I gave you the courtesy of walking away, but you threatened her, in my home, in front of my court. His grip tightened, and Garrett choked. That was a fatal mistake. Cale. Elena's hand touched his shoulder, and she felt the coiled violence beneath his skin. Don't kill him. He's not worth it. For a long moment, Cale didn't move. Then, slowly, he released Garrett, letting the Alpha collapse to the floor. Get out, all of you. And if any wolf from your pack sets foot on my lands again, I'll consider it an act of war. Garrett scrambled to his feet, his face purple with rage and humiliation. This isn't over. Yes, Kyle said quietly. It is. The wolves fled. Elena watched them go, watched Garrett stumble out the door supported by his warriors, and felt nothing. No regret, no fear, just relief that it was finally, truly over. When the last wolf had gone, Cale turned to her. Are you all right? I think so. Elena looked down at her hands. They were shaking, but not from fear. From adrenaline, from the rush of finally standing up for herself. I can't believe I just did that. I can. Kyle's expression softened. You've always had that strength. You just needed the space to find it. His court was watching them, these ancient vampires with their knowing eyes and small smiles. Elena suddenly felt very exposed, very aware that she'd just publicly declared her choice to stay with Cale in front of everyone. I should go, she said. I need to think. Elena, Kyle caught her hand as she turned away. When she looked back, his expression was serious. What you did tonight, choosing to stay, you understand what that means, don't you? It means I'm not going back to the pack. It means more than that. He stepped closer, his dark eyes searching hers. Wolves mate for life. If you're not pack, you're rogue. And rogues don't survive long alone. Elena's heart skipped. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you truly want to stay, if you truly choose this, choose me, then I want to offer you something permanent. Something that will protect you from any pack that tries to claim you. Something that will make you stronger than you ever imagined possible. You're talking about turning me. The words came out as a whisper. Making me like you. Yes. No hesitation. I'm talking about a blood bond, about making you immortal, about giving you a home that no one can ever take away. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a cold kiss to her knuckles. But only if it's what you want. Only if you choose it freely. Elena's mind raced. This was insane. Vampires and werewolves didn't bond. It went against every natural law she'd been taught. But then again, she'd already broken every rule by choosing to stay. What was one more? If I say yes, she asked carefully, what happens? We perform a blood bond ceremony. You drink from me, I drink from you, and the magic does the rest. You'll become vampire and wolf both, something new, something powerful. And you'll be mine, as I'll be yours, for as long as we both exist. Forever. Forever. Kyle's thumb brushed over her knuckles. I won't pretend it won't hurt. The transformation is painful, but I'll be with you through all of it. And when it's done, you'll be strong enough that no one will ever call you weak again. Elena looked at their joined hands, his pale and cold, hers warm with life. So different, but somehow they fit. I choose you, she whispered. I choose this. I choose forever. The smile that broke across Kyle's face was like sunrise, rare and beautiful and worth waiting for. Then let's begin. The blood bond ceremony took place in Kyle's private chambers, with only his most trusted court members present as witnesses. Elena stood in the center of the room, wearing a dress of deep crimson that Mrs. Harding had laid out for her. It was beautiful, far finer than anything she'd ever owned, and it made her feel like someone else. Someone worthy of this moment. Kyle approached her slowly, dressed in black as always. But tonight, there was something ceremonial about it, something ancient. He held a silver chalice in one hand and a small dagger in the other. Are you certain? He asked one last time. Once we begin, there's no going back. I'm certain, and she was. Maybe for the first time in her life, Elena was absolutely certain about something. Kyle nodded. He drew the dagger across his palm, letting dark blood well up and drip into the chalice. Then he offered it to her. Drink and speak the words. I choose you across all eternity. Elena took the chalice with steady hands. The blood inside was dark, almost black, and it smelled of metal and power and magic. She lifted it to her lips and drank, the taste coating her tongue, bitter and sweet and burning all at once. I choose you, she said, her voice clear, across all eternity. The power hit her immediately. It raced through her veins like lightning, like fire, like ice. Her knees buckled, but Kyle caught her, supporting her weight as she shook. Now I drink from you, he murmured against her ear, and we'll be bound forever. She felt his fangs pierce her throat, a sharp sting, then pressure, then a pull as he drank. It should have been terrifying, should have hurt more than it did. But instead, Elena felt a connection forming between them, a bond that went deeper than blood or pack or any oath she'd ever sworn. She could feel him, feel his centuries of loneliness, his hidden kindness, his fierce protective instinct. And he could feel her, all her fear and pain and newfound strength. When he pulled back, his eyes were glowing red. It's done. You're mine, Elena, and I'm yours. Then the pain began. It felt like her body was being torn apart and rebuilt from the inside out. Her wolf howled, her bones ached, her skin burned. She screamed, unable to hold it back, and Kale held her through it all, murmuring words of comfort in languages she didn't know. I'm here, he kept saying. I'm here. You're not alone. You'll never be alone again. The pain lasted hours or maybe days. Time lost all meaning. But eventually, it began to fade, replaced by something else. Strength, power. She could feel it coursing through her veins, remaking her into something new. When Elena finally opened her eyes, the world looked different. Sharper, clearer. She could hear heartbeats from rooms away, could smell blood flowing beneath skin, could see in complete darkness as if it were day. How do you feel? Kyle asked, still holding her. Elena tested her limbs, her senses. This new body that was hers but transformed. Powerful, she breathed. I feel powerful. Good. He helped her to her feet, And she realized she was steady, strong, not shaking at all. Because you are. You're something the world has never seen before. Wolf and vampire both. My queen. Queen. The word settled over her like a crown. Not Omega. Not damaged goods. Queen. What happens now? Elena asked. Kyle smiled. That rare, beautiful smile that made her heart stutter. Now we celebrate. Now we show the world that you're under my protection, not as a guest, but as my equal. And if any wolf or vampire or creature thinks to challenge that, his eyes glowed red again. They'll learn exactly what happens when they threaten what's mine. The formal coronation happened a week later. The throne room was filled with vampires and supernatural dignitaries from across the realm, all come to witness the impossible. A werewolf turned vampire, bonded to an ancient king, crowned as queen. Elena stood beside Kale's throne, wearing a gown of black and silver that seemed to shift like shadows in the candlelight. On her head sat a crown of dark metal, and around her throat, a choker bearing Kale's symbol, a mark that told the world she was his and he was hers. The ceremony was long, filled with oaths and presentations and formalities that Elena barely registered. She was too busy feeling her new power, her new strength, her new certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. When it finally ended, when the last dignitary had bowed and the court had dispersed, Elena and Kale stood alone in the throne room. He offered her his hand, and she took it without hesitation. Regrets? He asked quietly. Elena thought about her old life. The pack that had rejected her, the alpha who had thrown her away, the people who had told her she was worthless. Then she thought about this new life. The library full of books, the garden full of night-blooming flowers, the man who had chosen her when she'd been at her lowest. None, she said firmly. Not a single one. Kyle pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple. Good, because I've been waiting 800 years for you, Elena. I'm not letting you go. Promise? She whispered. I promise. He tilted her chin up, his dark eyes meeting hers. Across all eternity, when he kissed her, Elena felt it in her soul. This bond they'd forged, this impossible love they'd built from broken pieces. She'd been thrown out on her wedding day, cast aside like trash, left to die in the cold. But she hadn't died. She'd been found. And the vampire king who'd found her had given her something far more precious than mortality. He'd given her forever. And forever, Elena thought as she kissed him back, was just getting started.